From a young age, we're taught to associate freedom with financial success. The narrative is elegant in its simplicity. If you have enough money, you'll be free. Free to choose, to travel, to live without fear. It's a promise whispered by every advertisement, echoed in classrooms, repeated at family dinners. Wealth equals autonomy. But behind this polished surface lies a more troubling truth. As Erich Fromm once warned, modern man has not truly escaped the prison of the past. He has merely internalized it. The chains are no longer visible, but they're wrapped around our desires. The pursuit of money disguises itself as liberation, but often becomes a self-imposed captivity. You win the game, only to realize the board never ends. The more you have, the more you fear losing. The more you earn, the more you feel you haven't done enough. What was sold as freedom turns out to be another form of control. This is the golden cage, comfortable, luxurious, and deeply psychological. You can decorate it with designer furniture, fill it with technology, silence it with noise-canceling headphones, but it remains a cage. The freedom it promises is transactional and conditional. And for many who've made it, who have reached the summit of financial success, the view from the top is strangely empty. They discover that abundance does not always equal meaning. That status is not the same as fulfillment. That buying power doesn't quiet the existential restlessness inside. It's not poverty they fear anymore. It's the void. This is the paradox. We chase money to be free, and in doing so, become slaves to the very thing we pursued. As a society, we rarely stop to question this logic. We celebrate those who never stop hustling, who sacrifice sleep, health, relationships, all in the name of building something. But what are we building, really? A fortress or a tomb? In the end, it is not the lack of money that imprisons us, but the unexamined belief that it can save us. And so the golden bars remain, shining, seductive, and strong. There's a peculiar silence that surrounds success. On the surface, everything seems fine, polished, curated, enviable. The job title impresses, the apartment gleams, the social media feed tells a story of achievement and forward motion. And yet, beneath this flawless exterior, something quietly deteriorates. It's not dramatic, it's not loud. It's the slow erosion of peace, the creeping anxiety that nothing you do is ever quite enough. In his piercing critique of modern society, Byung-Chul Han describes our time as the achievement society, a system where the individual is no longer oppressed by external forces, but by the constant demand to outperform, to be efficient, productive, optimized. The enemy is no longer the boss or the system. The enemy is now yourself. This is the paradox of abundance. We have more than ever before, yet we are more anxious, more restless, more emotionally fragmented than at any other time in history. The golden cage we spoke of isn't just made of material comforts. It's also constructed from metrics, comparisons, and expectations. Success has become a quiet form of tyranny, where even the high achievers feel perpetually behind. You close one deal, but 3 more await. You get the promotion, but now the pressure doubles. The more you gain, the less you can afford to lose. The freedom that money was supposed to offer instead becomes another performance, another burden, another reason to never truly rest. What makes this anxiety particularly insidious is its invisibility. No one warns you about it. No one prepares you for the mental toll of constant self-measurement. You're expected to be grateful. After all, you're successful. What more could you possibly want? But the mind knows. It whispers doubts in quiet moments, in the spaces between meetings, in the loneliness after applause fades. You begin to measure your worth not by who you are, but by what you produce. Life becomes a series of transactions, of benchmarks, of invisible races against an undefined finish line. There's always someone doing more, earning more, living better. And so you push harder, smile wider, and carry the weight in silence. Byung-Chul Han identifies this state as a kind of self-exploitation. Unlike in traditional systems of oppression, where the worker was coerced from the outside, the modern individual is driven from within, a volunteer in their own overwork. We internalize the voice of the market, of competition, of ambition, until it becomes indistinguishable from our own thoughts. This is no longer just about capitalism, it's about identity. Who am I if I stop producing? Who am I if I don't grow this quarter? If I don't improve myself, maximize my mornings, master 10 new habits, what value do I have? And here lies the tragedy. We have confused performance with purpose. In our pursuit of money and status, we lose sight of the very things that once made life meaningful. Connection, creativity, contemplation. These don't scale. They don't show up on spreadsheets. But without them, something essential begins to die. The artist within us grows silent. The dreamer stops dreaming. The relationships we once cherished become transactional. Life becomes a calendar, a KPI, a series of shoulds. This is not to demonize success, but to unmask the silent suffering that often hides behind it. The anxiety of abundance is not just a personal issue. It's a cultural epidemic. We have glorified hustle and mistaken burnout for bravery. We've made exhaustion a status symbol. And in doing so, we've created a generation that's materially rich, but spiritually starved. The most dangerous prisons are the ones that don't look like prisons, and the most damaging anxiety is the kind that no one believes you're allowed to feel. But here's the truth. Even in the golden cage, the human soul longs for something more. Not more money, not more likes, not more accolades, but more stillness, more meaning, more being. Until we recognize that, we'll continue to run in circles, polishing our chains, convinced they're wings. What happens when you win a game you never truly believed in? When you climb to the top, only to find that the summit is silent, and the view leaves you cold. This is the silent crisis haunting many who have, by society's standards, made it. It's not burnout. It's not depression in the clinical sense. It's something quieter, more elusive. A feeling that despite having everything, something essential is missing. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, named this condition the existential vacuum, a spiritual emptiness that arises when life loses its sense of meaning. Frankl observed that human beings are not merely driven by the pursuit of pleasure, as Freud suggested, or by the pursuit of power, as Adler claimed, but by the pursuit of meaning. When that pursuit is stifled or replaced by hollow substitutes like wealth or fame, the individual begins to suffer in ways that are difficult to articulate. They may feel numb, directionless, or quietly despairing. They may try to fill the void with distractions, endless entertainment, consumerism, travel, substances, sex, but none of it truly satisfies. The hunger is not physical or emotional. It is existential. This is the danger of building a life around money. It is a tool mistaken for a destination. Money can buy time, opportunity, security, but it cannot tell you why you exist. It cannot replace the aching need for purpose. When we place wealth at the center of our lives, we are left orbiting a hollow core. As Frankl famously wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." But when that why is absent, when life becomes a series of hows without direction, we begin to decay from within. And it's important to note, this existential suffering is not limited to the poor or the oppressed. In fact, it often strikes hardest among the successful, those who, having checked every box, suddenly confront the terrifying realization that the boxes themselves were meaningless. They were chasing someone else's dream, someone else's definition of a good life. And now, surrounded by the rewards of their pursuit, they feel lost. This feeling is not uncommon. It's just rarely spoken about. Our culture is deeply uncomfortable with meaninglessness. We prefer to distract ourselves rather than question the foundations of our choices. But the existential vacuum doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. In fact, it grows stronger in silence. Frankl saw this vacuum as one of the root causes of modern neuroses, the inner turmoil that arises when our lives lack coherence, direction, or a sense of deeper significance. And unlike material poverty, which the world rushes to fix, existential poverty goes largely unnoticed. This void often manifests in strange, quiet ways. A sense of boredom that no activity can resolve. A low-grade sadness that clings even in moments of joy. A craving for something you can't name. These are symptoms of a soul that has been disoriented. Not by trauma or failure, but by success without substance. And in the age of hyper-consumption, where everything is designed to be pleasurable, the absence of meaning becomes even more disorienting. Why aren't you happy? You have what others dream of. You are, by all accounts, thriving. But inside, the silence grows. Frankl didn't believe that meaning could be given to us. It must be discovered, created, chosen. It's not found in pleasure or escape, but in responsibility, in love, in suffering, in creation. He believed that even in the darkest conditions, even in a concentration camp, the human being could find purpose. That message, though radical, is also liberating. No matter your circumstance, you can reclaim your why. But it requires a confrontation, a willingness to face the emptiness and walk through it, not around it. This is the turning point. When the illusion of money as salvation begins to dissolve, we are left with ourselves. And often, we don't know who that is. Our ambitions have carried us so far from our essence that we must now reintroduce ourselves to it. Gently, courageously. We must ask not, how can I make more? But why do I make it all? Not, what should I do next? But what matters now? This kind of reflection is uncomfortable, but it is also the gateway to real transformation. To escape the golden cage is not merely to reject wealth, it is to reframe it, to stop worshiping money as meaning, and instead seek meaning on its own terms. That may come through service, through creativity, through connection, through struggle. But it will never come through accumulation alone. As Frankl reminds us, meaning is not something to be consumed. It is something to be lived, and it begins the moment we stop running from the void and start listening to what it's trying to tell us. There comes a moment, often quiet, sometimes sudden, when the life you've built no longer fits. The suits, the routines, the carefully arranged markers of success begin to feel foreign. You look at your reflection and see someone you don't fully recognize. This isn't burnout. It isn't failure. It's a signal, a whisper from a part of you that's been waiting in the dark. Carl Jung called this part the shadow, the hidden self, composed of everything we've repressed, denied, or forgotten in our pursuit of control and acceptance. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is not just the dark or bad parts of us. It also contains our unlived life, the dreams we postponed, the talents we buried, the voices we silenced to become who we were expected to be. In the quest for financial security and social validation, many of us exile these inner parts. We suppress the poet for the professional, the adventurer for the administrator, the dreamer for the doer. At first, this seems necessary. We tell ourselves we're being realistic, mature, responsible. But over time, the cost becomes unbearable. The more we chase external success, the louder the internal unrest becomes. Jung warned that what we ignore within us doesn't vanish, it festers. The shadow doesn't disappear because we pretend it's not there. It waits, gathering strength, in the unconscious, manifesting in subtle sabotage, dissatisfaction, addiction, compulsive behaviors, quiet resentment. The more polished the image, the more distorted the interior can become. And when the life we've curated no longer nourishes the soul, the shadow rises. Not to destroy us, but to demand integration. This process can feel like a breakdown, a loss of identity, a crisis of meaning. But Jung saw it as a necessary confrontation. Without engaging the shadow, we remain fragmented, living only a partial life. We become characters in someone else's script, speaking lines we never wrote. And the cost of this disconnection is profound. We lose our vitality, our authenticity, our creative fire. We become efficient but hollow, high-functioning but numb. To integrate the shadow is not to reject who we've become. It is to reclaim what we left behind. It means recognizing that the parts of ourselves we disowned, the vulnerable, the wild, the uncertain, are not weaknesses, but essential pieces of a whole. Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming oneself, requires this inner reconciliation. It's not about perfection, it's about wholeness. Many who live inside the golden cage reach a point where material success begins to feel like a mask, heavy, suffocating, unsustainable. They start to feel haunted by their own unlived potential. The businessman feels a pull toward painting, The executive dreams of forests and silence. The lawyer begins to write poetry late at night. These are not random impulses. They are echoes of the shadow, calling for reintegration. And yet, our culture rarely encourages this. We're told to double down, to scale faster, to optimize further. The machine does not reward introspection, but the soul demands it. And if we do not respond to the call voluntarily, it often forces itself upon us, through illness, through collapse, through loss. Jung called this the return of the repressed, and it can be devastating if resisted. But if embraced, it becomes a path to freedom far more profound than anything money can offer. Reintegration is not a weekend retreat. It is an ongoing, courageous dialogue with ourselves. It requires us to sit in discomfort, to revisit the stories we've told about who we are and why we live the way we do. It may mean letting go of identities we've outgrown. It may mean disappointing others to stay true to ourselves. But in doing so, we begin to live again, not as performers, but as whole beings. The golden cage is not just built by society. It's built by the parts of us that feared rejection, instability, the unknown. And the key is not found in rebellion or escape, but in integration. By facing our shadow, we dissolve the inner split. We stop living as if success and authenticity are mutually exclusive. We make space for contradiction, for mystery, for humanity. In Jung's words, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness he spoke of is not evil. It is simply what we have not yet loved. And in the act of turning toward it, of reclaiming what we have denied, we find a deeper kind of freedom. Not from the world, but within ourselves. A freedom not dependent on status or wealth, but on truth, raw, inconvenient, liberating truth. What if freedom has never been about having more, but about needing less? What if the key to liberation isn't locked inside the vault of your bank, but hidden in the quiet refusal to be defined by it? After all the striving, after the accumulation, after the long climb toward a version of life you were told to want, what remains? That's the question we must ask as we approach the edge of the golden cage. Because the truth is unsettling. The door was never really locked. We just forgot how to walk out. Modern society equates freedom with choice. The ability to buy, to move, to change, to consume without limit. But as Erich Fromm pointed out, this idea of freedom as escape from constraint, is only half the story. True freedom, he argued, is not found in unlimited options, but in committed action, in choosing who we are, what we stand for, and how we live. Not because we're forced to, but because we have faced ourselves and decided consciously. In a world obsessed with more, authentic freedom begins with enough. To break the chains of financial obsession is not to reject money. It's to reposition it. Money is a tool, a resource. It can create space, open doors, relieve suffering. But it must not be mistaken for purpose. When we place money at the center of our lives, we distort everything else around it. Relationships become transactions. Passions become side hustles. Time becomes currency. And slowly, the vibrant spectrum of life collapses into a grayscale ledger of costs and returns. Rediscovering freedom requires a reordering of values. It demands that we ask uncomfortable questions. What do I really want? What am I sacrificing in the name of security? Who am I when I'm not performing for success? The answers are rarely easy, but they are necessary. Because the real chains are not forged by money itself, but by the identities we construct around it. The version of ourselves that is only valid when we are productive, profitable, and praised. Viktor Frankl warned that when life loses meaning, we become vulnerable to what he called the existential frustration, a state in which we fill our days with tasks and our nights with distractions, always busy but never fulfilled. The antidote, he believed, was not pleasure or power, but purpose, a self-transcendent orientation, living not merely for the self, but for something beyond the self. For love, for truth, for creation, for service. Freedom, then, is not the absence of limits. It is the presence of meaning. Byung-Chul Han's critique of our performance society echoes the same idea. that we are no longer oppressed by external tyrants, but by internal expectations. We are exhausted not from labor, but from the constant pressure to become our own masterpiece. And in that self-imposed prison, many of us lose our ability to rest, to reflect, to simply be. Breaking free, therefore, is not a matter of escaping work or rejecting ambition. It's about recovering sovereignty over our own attention, our own time, our own soul. Freedom, in its deepest form, is the courage to live in alignment with your essence, even when it costs you applause, recognition, or certainty. It's saying no to what glitters in order to say yes to what matters. It's choosing depth over comfort, truth over image, and meaning over performance. And this kind of freedom does not arrive with a windfall. It is carved out slowly, deliberately, through acts of defiance against the lie that we are only as valuable as we are profitable. To escape the golden cage is to begin walking a different path, one that might not look impressive on the surface, but is rich beneath the soil. It is the path of the inner rebel, the soul-aligned creator, the quiet resistor. It might mean earning less, owning less, doing less. But in that subtraction, there is addition, more space for love, more time for wonder, more capacity for presence. Carl Jung taught that freedom is not found in avoiding the shadow, but in integrating it. Likewise, freedom from the prison of wealth worship is not found in mere rejection, but in awareness. In knowing that you can play the game, but you are not the game. You can earn, but you are not your earnings. You can succeed, but success is not your name. This psychological distance is everything. It is the crack in the cage, the one that lets the light in, and maybe that's all freedom ever was. Not the power to do whatever you want, but the power to know who you are, and to live in fidelity to that truth, no matter what the world expects. Not a mansion at the top of the hill, but a stillness within, a quiet, rooted life that feels like home, even when no one is watching. The final irony is this. Once you are free inside, the world outside changes too. You stop chasing, and life starts unfolding. You stop proving, and start becoming. The cage loses its power because you've remembered something the world tried to make you forget, that you were never meant to be bought. You were meant to be whole,